My name is Sharon Bradley. I am proud to represent Rawi K through 12. I am a former principal, and also I was a central office leader that I led attendance in my previous district. I come to you with 25 years of service and public education, and I am a consultant here at Rawi. The topic is going to be from day one to every day. We're going to literally talk about strategies that can be part of a system that serves as a roadmap for success for the next school year, especially if your goal and if you're on this call, your goal is to prioritize attendance and increase attendance rates. And the learning target for today, so if you have any district friends, district leader friends, or even campus leader friends, tell them to hop on the line right now, because we're going to take this from before school to the end of school. So the learning target, attendees will be equipped with a clear coordinated blueprint for launching a strong attendance system and culture before the first day of school and sustaining that throughout the year. Now, this is something that this is a workshop that our team, it's like a full summit. It's a whole day that we do. So we're going to shrink this and to give you the core nuggets, so you can begin to have these conversations and begin to think, so you can have a great start for the next school year and beyond. So, of course, school just doesn't start in August or September, wherever you're coming to us from. It takes planning, it takes preparation. And I love when Sandy said earlier, when you have your superintendent, and if you're in a charter network or a private school, I mean, we have so many different leaders on the campus, but even that school leader, when they set attendance as a strategic priority, things happen. So if, I used to be a teacher, and if the teacher, if the principal is not excited about this, or they're not saying, hey, at this school, this is what we're going to be intentional about, then it's really hard to get everybody on board. So the superintendent, whether it's in the strategic plan, whether it's in the district improvement plan, let's set that intention. Review your attendance data from the previous spring semester to identify students with attendance concerns and devise a plan. When you get ready for next school year, I think the quote was, nothing is, what is predictable can be preventable. That's what it is. So we already know, if you right now, the kids who are struggling with attendance. Okay. So if we look at that previous year data, if we look at that previous spring data, we can kind of begin to come up with a plan, or to dig a little deeper and have a plan for these kids, whether it's outreach, whether it is having those barriers based conversations, because we already know what's going on. With Rawi, we have some partners that are just signing up with us right now, and they are getting a great deal, because they're signing up for next year, but they're able to get this year's data, so they're able to make all these comparisons, and they're able to devise this list like with just one or two clicks. The next one is, it's important to establish protocols for early identification of disengagement and absenteeism for students with attendance issues in the first 30 days of school. We know that kids just don't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be absent for several weeks. They start disengaging, shutting down, putting their heads down in class, start being tardy. There are so many different things that that students begin to do. And if teachers and if staff members, if they are not trained on how to identify the early signs and respond, then the kids are already going to have a year full of angst. But here's the thing, You don't necessarily have to focus on the negative side of things. For the first 30 days, you could start very positive. In my previous district, we did a 30 days challenge. For the first 30 days of school, if kids came to school every day, there were different things like for our middle school, the kids got an attend dance. Where we brought in a DJ or had one of the big speakers from Sam's Club, and the kids come in like the last hour on the Friday of the at the end of the 30 days, and they just had a social, a dance. And because we know that the power of habit, right? If someone does something for 21 days straight, it becomes a habit and it just becomes natural as to what they do. So again, let's train our people to identify the early signs of disengagement and absenteeism, but then also put that first 30 days challenge out there for your kiddos. Organize a back to school event. And if you don't do back to school events, do a community fair. We always hold these 2 to 3 weeks before school starts. And, yes, we have backpacks and we have, 70 different nonprofits and things, because the only thing we ask for them to get a booth is that they offer a free resource or free service for the families. And yes, we have, the Chick-fil-A, cow, and it's just so many wonderful things there for kids. The school bus, it's the first time when the kids see a school bus before the school year, they get all excited. But the big purpose of this is to equip families with the tools and services that they need to have a great school year, to help them overcome those barriers before school even start, like immunizations and things like that. Also, yes, before the first day or the first 1 or 2 days of school, we ask that our teachers make a positive phone call home. The student opened the door for a kid today, or the kid says something interesting in class, or, oh my gosh, I found out your kid was on my roster. I'm so excited, that he's going to be in my class. The reason why you do this is because like I know, a lot of parents are not answering the phone right now. So for the positive phone call home, I found out that a lot of my teachers, they had to leave messages. I know when you leave messages, you're like, are they really listening to this message? They are. And the whole purpose of the positive phone call home is so the family, they get it, the parent, they get it, they're like, oh my gosh, they actually had something positive to say about my kid, because I had 2 kids in school. The school called and my heart just stops for a second. You do this because along the line, if you need to call for absenteeism or something like that, they are more likely to answer that phone call because they remember that the last time you called from that number, you had something good to say about their child. And then I don't know about other states, but in the state of Texas, student enrollment and dropout efforts, it is year long. We used to look for kids who didn't start school, who were with us the previous year and didn't show up. They were called no-shows. We had like this small window. So now, instead of just going out looking for kids through home visits, I've been to the gas stations. I've been to different jobs. I've been to the movie theaters looking for kids. Begin to do that starting day one and keep those efforts throughout the year. Form a campus attendance team or use an existing team to review attendance data and interventions on a daily basis. Some people say, well, you know what, we don't need another team, Sharon. We have so many teams. I heard someone said that if they had the money, that they would use that towards their PBIS programming. The PBIS team can serve as an attendance team. Gone are the days where the work of increasing school attendance falls on one person, or our truancy specialist does that, or this AP, they just focus on attendance. When you have almost 15 million kids who are chronically absent across the country, it's going to take all of us, and we got to get people off the island. As I listened to Sandy, She says that when they meet, they talk about the interventions that are working and those that are not working. So this is very positive and very powerful. You may not have a PBI's team. You may have an admin team. You may have a grade level team. Or you may just form an attendance team itself. But in the very beginning, we got to identify these attendance team members. We need to schedule meetings. Are we meeting? What's the sweet spot? Are we meeting bi-weekly? Are we meeting monthly or whatever? And then we need to define the responsibilities. What are people going to do? And then monitoring different reports for their early intervention and identification before things fall off the rails. So that was more like pre-planning and preparation. Now let's talk about family engagement and communication. When we have increased student engagement, kids come to school, but there's another piece to that equation. Student engagement plus family engagement, it equals increased attendance. So how do we engage? Let's start by conducting outreach calls, to students and families to welcome them back. We call them welcome back calls. And sometimes just call and say, hey, are there any needs that you have? But for some people, they need to know when is the first day of school, what are the start times, and then maybe even share some strategies for student success. If you won't call, what about distributing a letter or email to families before school even starts? Yes, to introduce yourself, but to give relevant attendance information. Have you ever had an attendance goal and the school knows what the goal is, the district knows, but the parents don't know what the goal is? So if your attendance goal is 96%, that should be in that welcome letter. Parents need to know, hey, if a kid has been absent, I have so many parent notes. I have to submit those parent notes within a certain amount of time. What are those bedtime routines? What are those morning routines? What are those after school routines that can help my child? Oh, wow. Setting up an attendance information station at school events with key information for families. We're not trying to, trick anyone or anything like that, but we need to bring the message to where the people are. As we said earlier, we're in Texas where football is king. I would get so excited when I go to a football game and on the Jumbotron, they have attendance matters, or they say, hey, parents, make sure your kids come to school every day. Or they'll have the attendance goal, and they'll say, hey, help us reach our attendance goals. In the chat, can you share any other like school events where that you have lots of parents? And that can be a key opportunity for you to share information, whether it's for in the beginning, of the event, during halftime. I don't know, maybe when parents love to see their kids perform. So maybe my kids were in band. So maybe like a orchestra event or something like that. And but put those in the chat. And the reason why I want us to learn from one another. We always wonder, why is this parent doing this? Because I had an issue where the parent had the kid was out for 4 days, and we had a policy where the family, the parent gets 4 parent notes. Well, she thought that she can just use one parent note for all 4 days, and we were like, no, is one parent note per day. So it's these different things like this that they need to know.
So there's some comments about
Yes.
So from Sandy, this is a great idea. And then Lisa, fall spring festivals, winter programs, Sandy, tailgate at the Friday night home games, Tony Britton, theater productions. And then Cheryl Brown said, our annual McDonald's fundraiser, we shout out attendance showing up and their connection to success.
See, I love it. And the reason why these are all important, guys, is because I don't care what programs you have, what departments, even, how it doesn't matter how robust your curriculum is. If the kids are not in school, it's all for naught. And if kids are able to hear it from all the different spaces and parents are able to hear it from all the different spaces, it just becomes, normalized. And this is just how we do school in this particular district or school. So thank you
So,
so much for
so there's a
sharing.
couple other comments. Michael Barnes, food distributions, and then Miguel and Melanie back to school. But Hannah asked a great question. She said,
Yeah.
agree. I agree. Great idea. But I wonder, are the students who are chronically absent attending school events?
You know what? I will say in like football games and things like that, they do. Some of them do. I do understand what you're talking about. Like if there's like a theater production, the kids are already engaged. So you're kind of preaching to the choir. I definitely understand that. And that is why community partnerships are key. Like I would send announcements to area churches because churches they make announcements and they have different newsletters and things like that. These are trusted places in the community. I've posted at rec centers, so wherever they're at corner stores, a lot of kids go to the corner stores and get candy and things like that. So, partnering with area businesses and community agencies is also key. And so the next thing is a way is to implement monthly attendance communications. I dare to say campaigns, and I know we use campaigns, but campaigns is kind of like a way for people to think, well, it's a campaign, so you hadn't always done these things. But no matter what it is, with most schools have like a s'more or a newsletter or a website or whatever. Each month, I think is key to, whether it's a one liner or whether it's two lines on different, communication. So, what I did, I'm afraid to click on it because I'm afraid that it's going to mess up my things, but we're going to add the link to a monthly communication plan. Like, for instance, September is Attendance Awareness Month. Let's put something out there about attendance. In December or November, kids start getting sick. How about we put something out when it's too sick to go to school? We know that when parents are engaged and more visible, our kids are more visible. So 1 month, have a campaign of parent volunteers. We want to get volunteers. We need you. I know that there are different school districts that, have a going theme throughout the year. And is one of our partners, HEBISD. They said, "Be a hero here every day, on time." So here, wait, every day, ready and on time. But it's awesome, and they have a whole thing about it. So just each month, keeping it fresh, and each month keeping the main thing, so that it's not. Don't wait until your attendance start dipping in order to provide families with information. Another thing that we did around the holidays, we would have kids who would take the holiday, but they'll also be absent a week or 2 weeks after that because they're traveling or vacation and things like that. So in November, we began to talk about extended absences and how that impacts, academics and things like that. So because the parents have that ahead of time, they're thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't pull my kid out for additional weeks because now I have this information. Knowledge is key. All right. So the next one,
There's a quick
uh-huh,
comment that
please.
might, yeah. So Emilio Ortega said these are great ideas for tier 1 and 2 students, but students who are truant may have more complicated challenges. that are
Mm-hmm.
preventing them from attending school. I wonder if there are specific strategies for them, especially for students whose barriers are habit related.
Are who related?
Habit related.
Okay.
Barriers are habit. In other words, it's a barrier, it's a habit, not a not a illness or something, but just more along the lines of missing school for a habit issue.
Okay. Well, I was going to get to that later on, but no,
Okay.
this is a very good time in order to do that. Um, and we, first of all, we need to create for our tier three, we need to create spaces where families feel safe and comfortable to share what's really going on.
So
And
he explained the question a little farther, Sharon. Like
mhm,
they don't come to school because they are playing games all night.
mhm, yeah. Absolutely. Or and that's not a barrier thing. I don't know if like us in some of our previous sessions we talk about the different risk factors. And a lot of times as educators we paint this broad stroke and say the only reason why kids not come to school because they don't have transportation, housing, and things like that. That's not it. That's one of the things. Those are the barriers, right? But then there's a whole nother category, and that's called aversions and avoidance, school avoidance. There is something that is going on at school or that is not at school that they are avoiding. And it could be a variety of different things, but a lot of it that is rooted in anxiety or is rooted in fear or like bullying. A lot of kids don't come to school because they're being bullied. A lot of kids don't come to school because I'm gonna be honest with you, they don't want to deal with specific teachers or they don't want to they don't feel comfortable at school. So when you have those things, a kid feels safe at home for whatever reason. So when you have the conversation with those particulars, so we had in our district an attendance review board. It was the kind of like the step before we transferred them to or referred them to truancy court. And that is when you have the student, because student voice is key. A lot of times we create different attendance plans and things like that without the student's voice. Or we create, we as in schools, we create plans and say, hey, the counselor is going to do this, the teacher is going to do this, the administrator is going to provide tutorials or whatever. But there are no commitments from the students or the families, or there is not enough trust there for parents or students to share what is really, really happening. And so it's more than just a strategy. It is creating the space, the conditions for them to feel comfortable to share. And then also, once we know, to be able to mobilize resources and services, and not necessarily socioeconomic resources and services, but to get to the root of if the issue is they don't feel comfortable about a particular teacher, or they feel so behind in algebra they don't want to quote unquote feel dumb or anything like that. What are those things? And so I hope that kind of answered it a little bit, because there's not one reason why a kid avoids school. So there's not necessarily one solution. So the next thing is plan and promote parent engagement sessions that foster partnerships and awareness. Um, you're going to have kids who come to you from different states, from different districts, shoot, from different countries. And it's important for families to kind of get that information, but there's a but here. We can't engage families until we offer the olive branch, right, of partnerships. And we can start there, like, what are the hopes and dreams that the parent has for that kid? Hey, I want my kid to be a doctor. I want my kid to own his own business. I want my kid to just be happy, whatever those hopes and dreams are. And then it's important for us in the schools to connect attendance to how kids can help, achieve those dreams. But then also, we have to stabilize the family. A lot of we can have a parent education session all day long, but if a parent is in survival mode, they're not in a space where they're able to really receive. So, what are the things we need to do to stabilize the family so they can be in a place to engage? I will tell you, before the pandemic, I would have parent education session. I would have a whole gym just full of parents. Now they're not coming out in person anymore. So you may want to consider virtual, through a Zoom. Some people are doing like asynchronous. They are creating parent attendance courses, and then at the end they have a few questions, and they're able to see if the parent or the family completed it. So
Hey,
here's
Sharon,
also. Mhm.
Michael Barnes asked, how many engagement sessions are planned per school year?
I used to do two in the fall and two in the spring. However, that was centralized district wise. I had campuses that offered this monthly, and it wasn't for kids who were experiencing attendance issues. They just opened it up for everyone. So it was open. And then also on the secondary level, high school, they offered it monthly because kids who probably were missed so many days that they were at risk of losing credit, they were able to regain hours if they attended these with their parents. So it just depends on what the sweet spot is for your particular district or campus. So again, I offer 4 district centralized ones. And then there are some campuses I kind of train the trainer and they offer them monthly. Because keep in mind, you have kids enrolling throughout the year. All right. So now our next session is creating a welcoming culture of attendance. Um, and I know you're saying welcoming. Yeah, think about, you going to your favorite, restaurant or your favorite store. And if you don't feel welcome, or if the person won't even smile, or they don't know your name, especially if it's a place that you go often, you're less likely to go back. So it starts with the front. And a strategy is to review front office welcoming practices to ensure that students and families feel valued, safe, and connected. This is one of my favorite books. We're also going to put this in the chat. It's a very quick read. It's called The Friendly School. The customer service, the book of customer service for front office staff. It is so good. And it is something that's very reflective, and not just for your front office, for anyone in the building. Because, whatever the first impressions, it's everything. And if you want to try it, this is what you do. If you're in a district, you take your badge off and you go to a random campus and see how they treat you. A lot of times you don't necessarily know that this is going on in your district because they see the badge and they say, oh, it's one of us. Hi, how you doing? But that's not always the case as to what our families and our students feel. Think about students who come in late. You have the tardy pass, it's pink or red, and you're late, and your parents need to do better, all these different things. What about how about changing what your tardy pass look like? We're excited that Johnny is here today, and put the time on there with the smiley faces, and especially on our elementary campuses. Because when you have a first grader that doesn't come to school or comes to school late, it's not the first grader's issue. That's a parent issue. So why are we blaming and shaming the child, and the rest of their day is just, it's not going to be a good day because how you made them feel in the beginning of the day. The next thing is designate specific dates and times for campus-wide classroom community building. Research shows that when we know more about one another, we treat each other better. When kids are connected to school, when they're connected to their teachers or trusted adults, when they're connected to their peers, when they're connected to clubs and activities, or even the curriculum, they are more likely to come to school. That school connectedness piece. I went to school for special education. My professor, he always said, it's all about relationships, 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 but he never told me how to do it. So we have to be very intentional. I'm sorry, us being in the same class or in the same classroom or same school for a semester does not mean that we're just going to automatically build positive relationships. So I'm a restorative practitioner, and a lot of people, when they think of restorative practices, they think of conflict management, but 80% of restorative practices is community building. So what is that question that you can throw out there that you can begin to learn about the kids? And guess what? You answer the question too, so the kids can learn about you too. And I know my kids, there are certain classes that they absolutely love, like they loved Avid because Avid does things like this, because they feel like they are part of a community, and therefore they're more likely to come to school or go to those specific classes. And it may not be every day, it may be once a week, whatever that sweet spot in time is for you. When I was a principal at the alternative school, we did this every Monday, first period. I know why? Because my attendance was the worst on Monday mornings, and that made a huge difference. We're in school for about 180 days, but I will tell you, kids won't connect to the curriculum until they connect to one another or to you or to the teachers. So for the first 2 days, we just had community building activities. We talk about what kids need. You belong here. Is that just a phrase? Is that just a campaign? Or are you really putting in the work to make sure that kids feel that sense of belonging? So for the first 2 days, we did nothing but connection activities. Counselors, one of their things that they have to do as a counselor is provide guidance lessons. So they provided guidance lessons on how to set yourself up for success in the morning as it relates to attendance. What are the things you need to do, and things like that. So you may not be willing to give up 2 full days, but how about that first day of just connection and community building? The next thing, use attendance incentives, ideas to recognize students, parents, even staff, and promote a positive reward-based approach to attendance. Yeah, we think about providing incentives to students all the time, but our parents, they would love to be recognized. And they have wonderful tools to be able to do all three of these things. Our staff, when I'm asking my front staff to call all the kids, the families of kids who have been absent for so many days, or to reach out, or my staff that's doing home visits. This is a very thankless job. So when they're able to get some type of certificate or some sort of appreciation or incentive for doing the work, you will be amazed how intentional how it just keeps the momentum going throughout the year. Because in the beginning, we're all gung-ho, right? But then by October, it's like we're over it. How do you keep that going? So staff expectations and support. Brandy, I just want to stop for a second. Were there any comments or any questions before I continue to move forward?
Michael Barnes said surprise incentive days have worked well at my previous school, and there are no questions.
Okay, awesome. All right, so you have to be very focused on what's the main thing, and having an attendance goal embedded in the district improvement plan, because we know with district improvement plans, they also take shape the campus improvement plans. I was at a conference and someone said something that was so powerful to me. They say, yes, the goal is 100%, right? Always. But we have to be very, intentional. If, we were 92% and now the goal is, 95%, how about we recognize and support the kids who have 95% or more, rather than just, 100%. And then also, when we are articulating these goals, we cannot use the lingo of teachers. When a kid has 82% attendance rate, that's not a good thing. But for a parent, who says, I only want my kids to make A's and B's. We know that an 80 here in the state of Texas is a B. And you tell them, hey, your child has 81%, attendance rate. They're like, what's wrong with that? So let's be clear. But then also, we know what gets measured, it gets done. So if you put this in your district or your campus improvement plan, it becomes the focus continuously throughout the year. Never ever underestimate the power of healthy competition. Launch a grade level attendance contest to foster friendly competition and increase student motivation. I did this with several of the campuses, like for instance, our elementary campuses. They went, several of them, especially our Title I campuses, they went from pre-K to grade 5. So we had these little dials, and every week we looked, on the dashboard and said, okay, fifth grade, this was their attendance rate, first grade, this was their attendance rate. It becomes visual and shows who's, doing all the things and who's kind of bringing things a little down. We began to notice that the worst attendance came from schools that had pre-K or even kindergarten. And then we noticed that when we removed kindergarten or pre-K from that school's attendance rate, attendance went high. But when you have those dials and kindergarten parents and pre-K parents come in, and pre-K teachers and kindergarten teachers see, oh man, we have the lowest attendance rate again. Guess what? Those teachers start encouraging kids to come. They start calling the parents. The parents are like, yeah, you're right. We can do better. And all of a sudden, everyone rises to the occasion because everybody knows what's going on. Equip staff with tools to help identify the root causes of absenteeism. There is a link that I put in there, and is from Attendance Works, and it is a questionnaire that teachers or people who have a positive relationship with the child can ask the student so they can get to the root cause of absenteeism. The next is collaborating with leadership and departments to align district initiatives with attendance efforts, like connecting with your communications department, connecting with your academics department. That was a game changer when I was able to show the kids who are chronically absent and their state test scores, and the kids who came to school on a regular basis and their state test scores. We were able to see that kids who came to school on a regular basis were 2 to 3 times likely to pass the test, because I had principals and even district leaders say, we don't have time for that. But I don't care if it's increasing graduation rates, I don't care if it's test scores or whatever. It all comes back to kids having their face in the place and to get the more positive outcomes. I love when Sandy said that consistency across the district. When you have, in my previous district, there were like almost 70 campuses. And then I began to realize each of the campuses had their own attendance action plan. So when a kid went to a middle school, and then when they, went on up to a high school, they were like, I missed much more last year. And so this year, all of a sudden, it's an issue. So I wanted to share with you an example of kind of like one district, one attendance action plan, where you have the threshold, your days missed, the what, which is the intervention. But we're also here at Rahway, we're going to not just focus on the what, but the how, in order to do these interventions and supports effectively. So these are just examples. And with Rahway, you can customize your attendance action plan based on what works for your district. So, of course, we talked about this earlier, 0 absences. Let's do that positive phone call home. Maybe at 1 or 2 absences, once we begin to notice a child is missing, the parent can get a call or email from the teacher or front office. At absence 3, a warning letter. 5. It could be a parent conference with an attendance improvement plan or contract. At absent 6, it can be the second warning letter. At 8, we can have that parent meeting follow up. Follow up is key. If we said the student is going to do this, the parent is going to do this, the school is going to do this, the community agency is going to do this, how do we follow up and make sure these things are happening? And then maybe, a third warning letter or a truancy letter at 10. And then we talked about earlier a parent attendance education course. Where does that lie in the process? So again, these are just examples, because at the end of the day, chronic absenteeism impacts everything. When you have a kid that's missing, they're also more than likely going to have behavior issues. They're also more than likely are going to struggle in math and reading and maybe even state scores. And yes, when kids come to school, we know we want them to come to school because we want them to feel safe and cared for and all the things. But it's also a financial stabilization strategy. When we see more kids, we're able to get the funding that's needed in our 5 states that we talked about in order to do the important work. Right now, a lot of districts are looking for money, and some of our partners, they've been able to find lots of money using our program. So my question is, are you looking for money? Liberty Hill, that was Sandy, one of our speakers early, one of our partners. They've been able to recoup money because we're beginning to hear more and more schools are shutting down or they are just strapped on money. If you would scan this, I would love the opportunity to demo Rawi, the platform. It's absolutely amazing, and we can talk. We can do a specific for your district and the goals for your district, and whether it is to help find money or whether it's to create a more consistent system across the district or increase communication so that your parent notifications are more of like a parent conversation. We have a cool way to increase the likelihood of parents responding and when you send out information. So I thank you.